If I could have your attention, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I hate to interrupt your lunch and your conversations. I know we haven't been able to have conversations over the last several years. Thank you, Mr. Gay. The purpose of being here today, of course, is to have our Law Day presentation. But this year, the Clallam County Bar Association decided that we'd like to do something extra. And in our discussions, we decided that we'd like to have a day where we can also recognize the clerks of the Superior Court and the district courts and the administration of those courts, and just give us a chance to extend our thanks to them for everything that they do for us. There are a number that are in attendance here today. There should also be a number in attendance by Zoom. You may not be able to see them, but I'm hoping that they are there and can hear us, because what I wanted to convey to all of them and all of you here today is just our sincere thanks for everything that you do every day for all of the attorneys here in Clallam County. I personally have had my proverbial butt saved many times by the local clerks and court administrators, and I don't think that there's probably an attorney in this room who hasn't had a similar experience with the clerks and the administrators of our courts. They have often gone above and beyond what any reasonable person would be expected to do in order to accommodate some of our requests and to help fix some of our issues. One of the first lessons I learned as a young attorney was that you always want to make sure the clerks and administrators are happy. So this is a small effort to hopefully extend some happiness to the clerks and administrators who help us every day. Honestly, I wish that we could do a lot more for you, but perhaps this is a start in recognizing everything that you do for us, like I said, every day of the year, except for holidays. So while I'm not going to call out each one of you that are here and present on Zoom, if those of you who serve in the clerk's office or the administrator's office would please stand and let us recognize you, I would appreciate the opportunity to offer you a round of applause at least. Again, thank you for joining us for that. And I hope that we'll continue to recognize the service of those people that work for us in the clerks and administrators office in the future. By way of continuing some introductions, we do also have a number of judges present who are from the Clallam and Jefferson County courts. And so in no particular order, I would like to introduce them to you. And so judges, feel free to wave or stand as you may be interested. Do we have Judge David Newport present? Okay, he might have been in attendance. Commissioner Mack may be in attendance by Zoom. Feel free to applaud just in case he's there. Yeah. Judge Mindy Walker. Thank you, Judge. Judge Keith Harper from Jefferson County may be in attendance by Zoom as well. Feel free to recognize him. And Judge Brent Bazin is here as well. Thank you. Did I miss any of our judges other than our presenter? Okay. All right. So thank you all very much for attending. It now becomes my pleasure to introduce to you Raphael Urquia. Raphael, you are here. I am handing it off to him to introduce our speaker today.
So unfortunately, Dick Manning, who reached out to Judge Creatura, was supposed to do the introduction today, and he had a bit of a medical issue. He's fine, but he's not going to be able to introduce the judge today. So instead, he wrote me, looks like an essay about how to introduce Judge Creatura. Also, I don't know if it's me or my eyes, like I can't see as well anymore. Also, if you could come up here, Dick Manning likes to write in all caps so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to like yell or scream. I was always told not to yell or shout at a judge, so I don't think that'd be very good trial advocacy. So I'll try to keep my voice low, although I know I have a loud, sometimes annoying voice. So I'd like to start by saying Judge Creatura has been a federal magistrate judge for many years. Before that, he worked at several private law firms, including Gordon Thomas Honeywell, which is a very well-known, still a private law firm in the Seattle, Tacoma area. Also, and more interesting, and I don't know if this is a typo, but it looks like two of Judge Creatura's students are actually present here today. Is that a typo? Not a typo. So one is Carl Gay. Would you please, Dick Manning would like you to stand up. So would you, so would you please stand up, Carl Gay? Carl Gay is in all caps. That's correct. So that's good. And then the other one is Rob Tullock. Is Rob Tullock here? And then, okay. Come on. No, so Dick, no, so Dick does want you to stand up, but it's up to you. So, and then, so Judge Creatura taught both students. So, Your Honor, may it please the court, who is the better student? It was a tie. Okay. It's kind of like your kids. You love them equally. So, and then as a federal magistrate judge, Judge Creatura sees a lot of Section 1983 claims, which are prisoner relief claims of those in custody concerning the many issues they have behind bars. And that's why we're so excited to have him here today. It's an honor and a privilege to have any judge, especially a federal magistrate judge who is so familiar with the prison system and how it works and the injustices behind bars. And the Law Day theme, if you don't know, is justice behind bars. And it's my privilege and honor, and thank you on behalf of all of us here today to introduce Judge Creatura. Thank you. And do you want the microphone?
Yes, please. Oh, you hit it. Okay. See, without this clicker, I couldn't say a thing. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for showing up. I have to say, you know, when I got the invitation from Dick Manning, I go way back with Dick, 25 years on and off. He is such an incredible lawyer, former president of the Washington State Bar Association. I was associated with him on a couple of cases. He served as an arbitrator on one of my cases 23 years ago. And I was just floored that he could even remember who I was, but to invite me to this group, I had to join him. And then I show up and I've got so many friends here and former students. I mean, I go back with several of you a long way, and I can't believe that my practice was that far away from Port Angeles, and yet I still have so fond memories of the people that are here and others who are not. I'm here to talk about justice behind bars, and I'm going to start my presentation with a picture, and then I'm going to end it with a song. Okay, so just be ready. That's what we're doing. We're going to start with the picture. There it is. Pretty impressive, right? And you're going, what the heck is that? Well, I have to go back a little bit to when I first went on the bench, and that was 2009. At that time, I had been a civil trial lawyer for 30 years. I tried everything that could end up in a courtroom. Gary Williams knows I tried a case with him, against him. He's here today. Anything, plaintiffs, defense work, I did not do any criminal work. That was the one thing I didn't do. But if it ended me up in a courtroom, that's where I wanted to be. When I went on the bench in 2009, I realized that I was then going to be responsible for not only handling criminal cases, of which I knew nothing about, but that a good
portion of the work that I was going to do was also going to involve the civil side of prisoner litigation, which are, as was mentioned, 1983 claims and habeas corpus claims. I was brand new to this. My wife took me up to a photography exhibit up in Seattle. We both love photography, and so she drugged me along, and I was glad to go. And there were a whole gallery full of things by Chris Jordan, who is a photographer who specializes in trying to make a statement with his photography. This is literally called The Statement. And as you walk into that gallery, this 6 panels covers the whole side of a wall. It's as big as this back wall over here. It must be 80, 100 feet long, 12 feet high. And it's all looks like a huge bit of gold or orange or whatever it is. And as you get closer, you start looking at what those people were looking at closer and closer and closer until you get close enough to where you can see that it appears to be a folded garment, one on top of each other. And what it actually shows is it depicts 2.3 million folded prisoner uniforms. Those are the number of prisoners who were imprisoned in the United States in 2005. It's a huge number. That statement had quite an impact on me because I knew that some of those prisoners are going to be filing claims in front of me. When I first went on the bench, I quickly learned the scope of what I was facing. Because of the war on crime and the war on drugs, the amount of incarceration in the United States went and skyrocketed during the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. This is a graph that shows that between 1920 and 2006, it reached that monumental goal that you see at the top, just 3 years before I went on the bench. It was continuing to rise when I went on the bench, and it only started leveling off shortly after that. Every politician at that time found that an easy target and an easy way to get votes was to get tough on crime. So we put more and more people away in jail. We had mandatory minimum sentences. We had 3 strikes and you're out. And before it, we knew it, our prison population was going through the roof. Not surprisingly, it also included a number of impacts on a population that we only now are fully appreciating. Of the people who are incarcerated, about 65% of all the people that are in prison have drug and alcohol abuse issues. That compares to slightly less than 10% in the general population, 6 times more. Also, for mental health, at the same time that we were getting tough on crime, we were closing our mental health institutions. Those people found their way into the criminal justice system. So that by the time I went on the bench, the prison population included about 26% of the people who had mental health problems. And that compares with about 4% in the general population. This highest rate of incarceration in the world was in the most developed country of the world. No other developed country even comes within the top 15. The other top 10 are somewhere in Central America or in Asia or in Africa, but not any civilized country. We have 6 times the population of incarcerated persons in the United States that they do in England, 7 times the amount of people incarcerated in France. Things had to change, and they did. When I first went on the bench, I learned about some of the things that I was going to be dealing with, the writ of habeas corpus and the 1983 claims. And at that time, I also listened to an NPR report, interestingly, just before I was about ready to attend what they call baby judges school, which I had the good fortune of having one in San Antonio and one in DC. Just before I was headed to DC, I heard this report on NPR radio about the 50th anniversary of Gideon versus Wainwright. If you all remember that, Gideon versus Wainwright was the Supreme Court case in the early 1960s that guaranteed counsel for criminal defendants. That was the result of a habeas corpus petition that worked its way up to the Supreme Court. That NPR report said that the original Gideon's petition for writ of habeas corpus was actually hanging in the hallowed halls of Arnold and Porter, a very well-known firm in DC. At the time, it was not Arnold and Porter, it was Arnold and Fortas. Abe Fortas was the person who the Supreme Court called on to argue that case before the United States Supreme Court. And I had to go see that case. And so I wanted to see the petition, and I got a hold of the reporter, and I got a hold of Arnold and Porter's administrator, and I said, I want to see that petition. And she said, well, come on down. And so I had to go through some blocked halls, and then they said, I'm sorry, we already took it down. It's in our permanent collection and inventory. And I said, oh, I came all the way to see it. And she said, well, I'll pull it out and send you a picture. So she did. This is a picture of the original habeas corpus petition filed by Mr. Gideon that ended up in the Supreme Court. And it was handwritten in his own hand. And he said in that petition, the 2-page petition, I was made to stand trial without the aid of counsel in violation of my rights of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States. He filed that petition in 1962. And if you think that it made it to the Supreme Court because he tried real hard and he happened to be special, he wasn't. There were hundreds of these petitions that were filed all the time in the Supreme Court. It was the Supreme Court, the Warren Court at that time, that decided that they were going to look in this general direction and consider a petition. And they pulled this one out of many and had Abe Fortas argue the case in front of them. That habeas corpus petition changed the course of destiny for all criminal defendants. I have to say that probably 90% of the defendants that appear before me every day in a criminal case have appointed counsel. They can't afford counsel. They never could. But now they have the benefit of a lawyer to represent them. Well, I have to say that had quite an impression on me. I decided that if I was going to become a magistrate judge and if I was going to have to deal with prisoner cases, I wanted to find the next Gideon petition. I wanted to see if I could have an impact on the prison population, and I wanted to learn a lot more about it. And so when I got back, I started the work of working on 1983 cases and habeas petitions. And if any of you have dealt with that, it is really complicated, probably the most complex of civil litigation that you can get into. Habeas corpus is not an easy thing. And the thing I found ironic about this particular petition is this guaranteed the representation of a lawyer for all criminal defendants, but it was a civil lawyer who argued the case of a civil petition. And that civil petition, who has been filed every day by prisoners throughout the United States, they do not have the right to an attorney because it's a civil case and not a criminal case. And we have to find extraordinary circumstances in order to appoint an attorney to a civil habeas corpus case. And then there are a number of other obstacles. They have to exhaust all of their state appeals before they can file a petition. And they have to make their constitutional argument, federal constitutional argument, at every stage of the way. And if they don't, they lose their right to file a writ of habeas corpus on what's called a procedural default. And if they forget to do that and they go back to state court and the statute of limitations lapses on their petition, and the only way they can get out is to show by clear and convincing evidence that they're actually innocent of the crime, with evidence that wasn't available at the time. Now, if you've listened to that, and if you can consider what kind of obstacles there are for anyone trying to have a writ of habeas corpus petition granted, you can appreciate that it doesn't happen all the time. 1983 cases have similar problems for prisoners. Something called the Prison Litigation Reform Act in the 1990s was passed because with all of those new people in prison, there were a lot more claims being filed. It was stretching the resources. And there were a lot of prisoners complaining about the conditions in prison. Well, the one way to stop it is to make it harder for them to proceed with their litigation. Thus came the Prison Litigation Reform Act. There were a number of obstacles to them completing a successful complaint. So I saw that in the first few months on the bench, and I wanted to do something about it. But I'm a judge. I have to follow the law. I'm not an advocate. And so it was up to me to see if there were avenues in the law that made it available for lawyers and litigants to make an effective case. I took it upon myself because I wanted to be more involved. I started visiting prisons. Prior to being on the bench, I had never been in a jail before, fortunately. Probably wouldn't have been on the bench if I had. I had never visited a state institution before, either state or federal. I have now, over the course of the last 13 years, been to almost every single one of the state facilities in the state of Washington. Monroe, which is the largest in the state, right outside Seattle. Walla Walla, the federal or the state penitentiary. I've been to McNeil Island, where they have the Civil Commitment Center. I've been just a few blocks away from our courthouse, our International Northwest Detention Center for immigrants. Shelton, you name it, I've pretty much been there. I know that every time I went to these places, I was getting the judge's tour, right? They clean everything up. They make sure that I see the best side. I know that. But I also ask every time I went there if I could talk to some of the inmates. Sometimes I was able to, sometimes I wasn't, but I learned a lot on those trips. I went over to Eastern Washington and Walla Walla, and I talked to the superintendent. They don't call them wardens anymore. They call them superintendents. And Mr. Gonzalez had been in that position, or had been working for Walla Walla penitentiary for over 25 years, and now he was warden. And he said there are kind of two breeds that are currently staffing the prisons. There's the old guard that says our main purpose is to make sure we're secure and that our fellow guards are not harmed and that they do their time. And then there's a new group that says these are people that they're incarcerated now, but 90% of them are going to go out and they're going to live next to you. And what do you want to have happen when they come back out? And Mr. Gonzalez was in that second group, but he showed me that I cannot be a Pollyanna about it, that there are security issues too. He took me to the highest security level and he said there was a murder here last week because one of the inmates was able to successfully communicate with the inmates on the other side in a gang. And there was a contract out by somebody that was in solitary and he ended up dead. So it's not to say that these are safe institutions, and I have no thought that we can't let down our guard, but I also know that there are human beings behind those bars. When I went to Monroe, that was an incredible experience. I met with a group of lifers. There were 8 of them, and we all sat around in a circle and we're talking to each other. And I don't remember much about our conversation, but I do know at the end, we felt comfortable enough to where I asked him, I said, you know, you're in here for life. There was this one guy that was older than me. He had been behind bars for 40 years. And I said, you know, what keeps you going? What makes you wake up and do this? And he looked at me and he said, you know, I think that my job right now is to make life easier for those who are going through the system. You know, let me see the new inmate. Let me show them around. Let me tell them what to do and what not to do. Let's figure out a way for your life to be better so that when you get out of here, it'll be better. Another guy right next to him, another lifer, he popped up and he says, you know, we all got families out there. We all still have people who are part of that community. And I want the people that leave this institution to serve that community. And so my goal is to make it safer for my family who's out there. I thought, wow, they figured out a way to survive. And I found programs at a lot of these places that are really encouraging. I went to the Purdy Women's Facility. It's the only women's facility in the state of Washington. Happens to be 10 miles from where I live. They have a group of women who go in after they're convicted and they're pregnant. And they have what's called babies behind bars. And they raise their infants from the time they're born until the first few years. And they figure out ways to be a mother so that when they come out, they not only have a child, but they have a life. Programs are being instituted in prison facilities that I have to say are incredibly productive, and they're getting better. For the first time, drug and alcohol addiction is being really seriously treated in state facilities. Now, you can get medically assisted treatment at several of the state institutions. Never before has that happened. In Maryland, they started providing that anyone who left a prison could have 6 to 8 weeks of treatment so that when they re-enter, they don't go back on drugs, which is a likely result and often happened. It's been met with a lot of really good results. And for the first time last year, I just learned at the Federal Detention Center, they offer medically assisted treatment with people who are already on it. Suboxone is the most popular one, or the one that's used at the Federal Detention Center. These things are happening, and it's pretty exciting to see that it can actually occur. Now, does that mean that everything's better? No, it doesn't. I've got to tell you that over the last 13 years, of all the federal habeas corpus petitions that I have had come across my desk, I've only recommended 2 be granted. One of those recommendations was not followed by the district court judge. It was a man who had been convicted, actually pled guilty to murder. And there was evidence of his actual innocence that came up 10 years after he had been incarcerated. I decided that there was clear and convincing evidence that he should get a new trial. District Judge Layton disagreed with me. He had a full hearing and he decided, no, it doesn't reach that high standard of extraordinary circumstances, does not meet the high standard of clear and convincing evidence. So that prisoner remained in jail. I actually learned that he was released last year because he had served good time, but he still has his guilty conviction on his record. The other petition I granted or recommended granting was just last year of a woman who had been convicted of killing her child. I didn't think she got a fair trial. And so my recommendation is that she be given a new trial. Currently, Judge Peckman is considering that case, and she's going to get her trial in the fall. So those 2 needles made it out of the haystack. How many of those petitions did I look over that were not properly drafted, that ran into procedural hurdles, that I couldn't see the trees in the forest? I couldn't see the individuals behind because of the problems with our system. I don't know. But I do know, I suspect there were more than 2 people that deserved to have their day in court. For 1983 claims, I can tell you that there have been more than a dozen. I can't remember how many, but I've recommended granting those 1983 claims for some serious conditions that have occurred behind bars. And I can tell you that every time I do, there's a good result. Prisoner either gets a settlement or some other accommodation, or something gets better at a facility. Every time that that's happened, except for once, a lawyer was there. A lawyer was representing the prisoner, either because they were appointed or through a pro bono system like you have here, or the guy just got lucky. I don't know. But I do know that lawyers make a difference. Every time that you can have a lawyer represent one of these people, their cause is much more likely to be heard. you've learned how to jump through these procedural hurdles. You know how to have your voice heard before a court. And unless we can provide for representation of those people behind bars, the voices won't be heard. Now, I can also tell you that there are some improvements that have happened in the prison system since I became a judge. And I'm proud to say that it's happened, but it doesn't have anything to do with me, frankly. Society has learned that mass incarceration is not the best solution. There have been some lawyers, again, who have really kind of led the way in that regard. If any of you have read two of the books that I really suggest you consider reading. One is Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, who is the Innocence Project, and he went down south and represented a man who had been convicted of murder some years before and got him off. But it was a long story, and it was an African-American man who had been treated poorly by the courts. Also, another book is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Now, she is a former clerk from Chief Justice Breyer. She's also now a professor of law at University of San Francisco, I believe, Law School. She did a complete study and tried to analyze what's going on in the prison system. And she found, not surprisingly, that our criminal justice system is having a disparate impact on people of color, men of color, and social lower economic order. She found that there were a half dozen reasons for it up and down the criminal justice system, beginning with where the police are concentrating their investigation efforts. What kind of information is given by prosecutors to the judge for purposes of determining search, where you can have racially imbalanced statements being made that are used to persuade a court, to going into trial and a jury having unconscious bias, not even realizing that they have a bias, and yet expressing it in the way that they react and they rule. Then in a prison system that is now populated by far more by African Americans and people of color than the rest of America. Those books started opening the door. People started talking about it. And that is what it took, I think. When it came out that the war on crime wasn't working by putting everybody behind bars, and that the war on drugs wasn't getting any better because you still had a lot of drugs out there, they started figuring out ways to lower the incarceration rate. And it's had its impact. Because now, I can tell you that the incarceration rate in the United States is significantly lower. By 2000, I couldn't find another pretty chart, so I'll just have to put it up on the picture again. By the end of 2020, the number of incarcerated persons had dropped almost 40% in the United States to 1,215,000. Now, if you take Mr. Jordan's picture, look what that does. Now, all those people are now no longer incarcerated, and there are a number of reasons for it. It's not just because the United States has become more conscious of the prison population. COVID had a lot to do with it as well. There was a release of a number of prisoners, compassionate release because of their infirm physical conditions, and they were allowed to go out on parole, much to the chagrin of our probation and pretrial services officers, who they were completely surprised that suddenly they had hundreds of more people to be supervising than what they had before. In addition to that, there were some other acts, including the Fresh Start Act. And in the Western District of Washington, we also have the DREAM Court, where you can avoid being incarcerated by going through a successful treatment program for drug addiction. There was a number of situations in which the First Step Act was just announced by President Biden this week, in the middle of all of his all the stuff going on with war. he found a way to announce a new initiative putting more than $1 billion in programs for people coming out of prison so that their employment opportunities are greater, so that employers can't ask, have you been convicted of a felony anymore? So that you can provide drug and alcohol and employment opportunities and housing, because these are the services that people need when they come out of jail. They don't just come out and sit on a street. They're going to be in our neighborhoods, and how they make the transition back to what we want them to do requires programs. Now, where does that come in for lawyers? I can tell you that to the extent that you are representing any of these people for purposes of making their transition back into the community, that's tremendous. I would like to have more volunteers for lawyers to be representing those people who are still behind bars. I told you before that I wasn't very happy with my record on 1983 cases because I hadn't granted enough. I can tell you that probably the biggest impact I had was on a case where I got reversed on appeal. Yeah, I know. Judge's worst nightmare. Judge Bryan always used to tell me, you're not a real judge until you're reversed. Well, I'm a real judge now. This was a 1983 case in which someone at the Special Commitment Center, this is out on McNeil Island, it's for people who have been convicted of serious sexual assault. And after they serve their prison time, they are civilly committed to the SCC because they are too dangerous to be released in the public. That's the population at the SCC. And McNeil Island, if any of you know, it is an island that's literally only a few miles away from where I live. But it is the only inhabitants of that island now since they closed the prison is the SCC. It's an old facility, but it's been there a long time. I got a petition, one of hundreds that came my way, where a prisoner, I won't call him a prisoner, I guess you call him a guest if they're at the SCC. He was complaining about brown water. He says, you know, every time I take a glass of water, it's brown, there's sediment in it. You know, there's things in it that I don't want to drink and my health is failing and it shouldn't be like this. Well, I mean, I looked at the case and the state immediately filed a very extensive response saying, oh, this water's fine. It's been this way for years. We have had it tested every week. We have all these experts that come and say the water's perfectly fine and healthy. It's not hurting anybody. It may be discolored every once in a while, but it's not bad. So I send out an order and I tell the prisoner, I said, you got to give me some evidence, something that shows that your health has been impacted by this water or that there is some reason to believe that it's dangerous. Of course, he wasn't represented by counsel. He was unable to provide any support. So I recommended granting the motion for summary judgment. That report and recommendation was adopted by the district court judge, but this guy didn't give up. He wasn't feeling good and he continued to file, and he filed in the Ninth Circuit. Well, the Ninth Circuit reversed. They said, brown is bad. That's bad enough. And they reversed and it got sent back to me. And this was like 3 years later. And I'm going, okay, fine. You know, I was contemplating appointing counsel for him and he died. Yeah. But not surprisingly, when the Ninth Circuit said that brown is bad, 3 other guests at the SCC, they filed their petitions. And they all went to my colleague, Judge Crystal, not to me, which was fine. I had kind of had my go around on this, but he did appoint counsel. And I'm happy to say, because some of you may know their names, but Brett Pertzer was one of them and Casey Armans. They came in and they're representing basically a class of the SCC, pro bono. And every day they're grinding in, and I checked in with Judge Crystal. I said, whatever happened to our brown water case? Well, it's going to trial in the fall. And Casey and Brett, I guess, have survived motions for summary judgment, and now they're going to trial. That's a happy story. I say it's a happy story because they're going to have their day in court. People that otherwise wouldn't have a voice have a voice. Why? Because lawyers are there to help them. Now, I wish I could say that every case turned out that good. It didn't. I'm going to tell you one more case that's pending, and I have to be careful because that case is still before me. So I want to be rather circumspect and only tell you those things that are of public record. But it was a case that was filed by Tony Penwell, and he is an inmate at the same facility where I met with that group of lifers right outside Seattle, the largest facility in the state of Washington. The conditions at the WSR when COVID set out, according to Mr. Penwell's complaint, were very bad. They were doubling and tripling up on their jail cells. They weren't being given opportunities to socially distance. They were, according to his allegations, they were threatened if they complained, that if they asked for more protection, they were treated even worse and subjected to violence because the inmates there were concerned and tensions mounted. I looked at that case and I also realized that there were 3 other cases that were filed by inmates at Monroe, related cases making similar allegations. So I issued an order on December 27th of 2021. That wasn't that long ago, but if you recall, that was just before the outbreak of Omicron. That was just before a huge epidemic, the largest wave of epidemic that we had ever faced. And even though Mr. Penwell had made a motion for preliminary injunction, he didn't do it well. So instead, I entered an order referring the matter to the federal pro bono panel for purposes of representation of Mr. Penwell. Unfortunately, no one responded. So in March, I issued another order and I said, there's no constitutional right to counsel. And despite the court's effort, we were not able to locate counsel. So you'll have to represent yourself. Now, that case is still ongoing. And so I can just tell you that that's the matter of public record. You know, we've probably made our way through COVID, hopefully. Maybe the worst is past. But was that a situation where a lawyer could have made a difference? I suspect it was. There are opportunities for everyone in this room. There are opportunities that can make a difference. It can be through the Innocence Project, which has an office in Seattle. It can be through the Northwest Judicial Justice Project. It can be through the federal pro bono panel. There are lots of opportunities. And I can just tell you that when you look at Chris Jordan's photograph, the photograph that you're looking at, if you look at it from afar, is just a swash of orange. But the closer you look at every single individual case, you start realizing that the only way that justice is going to be provided to those behind bars is if you do it on each individual case. And that, my friends, is up to each one of you. Now, I told you I was going to end with a song, right? Don't worry, I'm not going to sing. But the song by Bonnie Raitt. Anybody got any Bonnie Raitt fans in the audience here? Yeah, okay, all the older ones, Bonnie Raitt. Yeah, okay. Look, Bonnie and I go way back. Way back. I can go back to 1972 when I was in Boston going to college and I was rocking out to Bonnie. And if you don't know her, she's got this flash of red hair and she's wailing on a guitar. There weren't very many women that were, playing guitar back in the early 70s, but she was one of them. And she did rock and blues and country and a little bit of John Prine blown in there, but she was great. And I've covered her. I've followed her for 40 years, 50 years. seen 3 of her concerts. My wife and I have seen Bonnie Raitt 3 times. And my wife and I are coming up on our 39th wedding anniversary. And I don't know how she did it, but Bonnie Raitt's coming to town. So she's coming to Seattle, and she tried to get, my wife tried to get tickets, and it was all sold out. So couldn't go there, but she's going down to Oregon too. And I guess in Eugene, they haven't heard of Bonnie Raitt quite as much as we have here. So she got tickets. And so we're going to go to the wine country, and we're going to listen to Bonnie Raitt. And I finally figured out why she's doing another tour. She's 74 years old, and she's still rocking. She's still got her red hair, but she's got some gray streaks in the middle now. A lot of gray streaks. And she's still got a gravelly voice. It's even smokier now than it was back then. But the reason she's doing a tour is she came out with a new album. And this album just came out. It's called Just Like That. And came out like last week. And so my wife sent me the tag to it, and I listened to it. And sure enough, one of the songs just knocked me off my feet. And I found out a little bit about it. It's called Down the Hall. Now, Bonnie had been reading a New York Times article, and the New York Times article was about incarcerated people who were dying because they were getting older. And I learned something by reading that article, because I went to the article. And it said that actually prisoners older than 55 serving time in federal and state prisons make up the fastest growing age group behind bars. Well, that makes sense, because those are the ones that are in the baby boomers who got the longest sentences and are in for the duration. They increased by more than 500% since the 1990s. It went from a population of 26,300 in 1993 to 164,800 by the end of 2016. So while all those people are getting out of prison and our prisons are being depopulated, the older population of prisoners, the ones that have been there for a long time, are dying in prison. And this was a story about one of those men. His name was Kevin Lyman, and he was a murderer. And he was serving life. And he was serving on the hospice facility at Vacaville Prison. This is his song. Had the flu in the prison infirmary. My last day, I looked up and I saw a man wheeled around the corner, down to skin and bones, that's all. I asked the nurse, "Where's he going?" She said, "Hospice down the hall. He probably won't be in there long. Any day, we'll get the call." I asked if they let family in, and she said, "Not really at the end. Truth is, a lot don't have someone, no friend or next of kin." The thought of those guys going out alone, it hit me somewhere deep. I asked, could I go sit with them for some comfort and relief? Next thing you know, I'm on the ward doing things you can't believe, like shaving Julio's bony head and cranking him up so that I could wash his feet. I used to run when I saw Tyrone. Knowing your place is what it's all about. Now he's here, doubled up in pain, cancer eating him from the inside out. I sit and I wait outside his stall to help him when he's done. Whatever shame we might have felt, well, that's all come and gone. I can't undo the wrong I did, give back the life I took. But maybe when the time comes for me, I'll get a second look. I can't know about religion. I only know what I see. And in the end, when I hold their hand, it's both of us set free.
Give back the life I took. But maybe when it comes my turn, I'll get a second look. I don't know about religion. I only know what I see. And in the end, when I hold their hand, it's both of us set free.
Thank you, Judge. We appreciate your presentation, and honestly, I don't know if I've been moved by a CLE before, but it actually happened today. I think maybe you have a future as well as a sort of a Johnny Cash style voiceover artist. So I think that might work as well. So thank you, sir, for your presentation. We appreciate you coming here and doing that for us. I'm sure if anybody has any questions or willing to talk to you afterwards, or perhaps you can contact him at his office to discuss that later. Another reason for our gathering here today, however, is to thank two people who have been of special service to the Clallam Jefferson County pro bono lawyers and to the citizens of Clallam and Jefferson counties in helping to assist them at no cost to the public. My job today is to help present the award for Volunteer of the Year to a very hardworking attorney in Clallam County. And I have to say that I've only been here for a few years and I don't know him as well as I should. And so when you don't know somebody as well as you should, you go looking for other people that might know. And so I went to the internet. And if you know anything about the internet, people go there to complain and write bad things about people that they're upset about. So I think it's interesting that these are the first two things that I found about this person. Harry Gaznick is one of the most amazing attorneys I have ever met. Back when I was a deputy prosecutor, Harry had many, many cases against me, several trials as well. He worked tirelessly with a fierce tenacity for his client's best outcome. Harry is one of the few attorneys who has my everlasting admiration. He is an attorney of ethics, intelligence, and hard work. No one can compare. He is the best. And then a second one from a different perspective. Harry is a man with angels on his shoulders. He defends people, all people. It was good to have him defend my wife several times. She got a lot of domestic charges due to being a raging alcoholic. He treated us both with dignity. I buried my wife almost 2 years ago. I miss her terribly because she had the warmest heart and soul I've ever come across. She did not choose her path. Her parents did, including alcohol in her baby bottle. Harry somehow knew she was good. I will always love him for that. And this is the internet speaking. Can you believe it? So I don't think I can do anything more to say, how meaningful Harry's work is to the people here in Clallam County, other than to say that he has been the primary driving force about handling criminal vacate and expungement cases for our organization. He handles all of them at no cost to the public. And that gives you an idea of who we're honoring today. I hope you'll join me in welcoming him up to the podium and allowing me to present this award to Harry Gasnick. This is for you, sir. Thank you. If you'd like to say something, you have 2 minutes.
It's amazing what you can post online under other people's names.
All right, we do have one more honoree today to honor from Jefferson County, and to do that, I believe I'm introducing Colette Kostelic to present that award.
Thank you, James. It's my distinct pleasure today to present the award for Volunteer of the Year to my friend and colleague, Bill Meyer, who's been a longtime practicing estate planning attorney in Jefferson County. He's now retired from active private practice, but he has continued his bar membership to enable him to continue to do pro bono work for Clallam Jefferson County pro bono lawyers. I didn't search the internet for him. I thought actually, since we carpooled over today, I would take the opportunity to learn more about Bill's, some fun factoids and things that I could share with you today. But then I was told this morning that I wouldn't have to present the award. So we just spent the entire drive talking about other things, and I enjoyed it probably much more. So I don't have any fun factoids to say, except we found out we were both born in San Francisco. But that doesn't begin to speak to how the time and effort Bill has spent in the community doing pro bono work has been so invaluable, especially for estate planning issues and client matters in that regard. So again, it's my real pleasure to present Bill, who is so deserving of the Jefferson County Pro Bono Volunteer of the Year Award.
So thank you, everybody, for coming this afternoon. I think it's important to note that we did have one addition to our number after we started and after we thanked all the clerks and administrators. Casey Clayton snuck in. So thank you, Casey, for sneaking in. And thank you again to all of the clerks and administrators. We're thanking you today, and hopefully we'll continue to thank you throughout the year for your service. Thank you again, Judge Creatura, for your presentation and for your willingness to come here and present that to us. Thank you all for participating today. We're looking forward to getting back to monthly CLE presentations, hopefully next month. If you need anything from the Bar Association or from CJCPBL, please contact us. Have a good rest of your day.